In lecture 1, I would like to emphasize on these topics. The first one is the history of microbiology. So we will learn about how the scientists discover the microorganisms and how they can classify the organism, the living organisms and microorganisms. And finally, we will study about the microbial morphology and the technique for observation. So after students finish this class, I hope the students should be able to explain how the microorganisms involved in agriculture and explain the classification of the living organisms and the microorganisms, and explain the principle of microbial observation techniques. And finally, students should be able to illustrate the main morphology of microorganisms. Okay, before we continue with the classification of living organism or the history of microorganisms, I would like to tell you a little bit about the importance of microbiology or the importance of this subject. So since you guys are from the School of Integrated Agricultural Technology and Food Safety Management, in my opinion, I think there are at least two areas of applied microbiology that mostly involve or mostly important in your field of study. The first one is the agricultural microbiology. In this subject, it's concerned about the relationships between microbes and plants or animals, such as the plant diseases. If you see this vegetable or some fruit here, in your opinion, do you think are there any microbes or microorganisms contaminated in this raw material or not? Yes, you might think it could be possible, right? So, in the field of agricultural microbiology, you will learn what kind of microorganisms can cause the plant diseases. And this microorganism can also have some problem with the human health or not. The next one is the soil fertility or nutritional interaction. This example shows you about the importance of microorganisms. Some of them can produce the plant nutrients. For example, they can fix nitrogen, they can solubilize the phosphate. So in this case, these microorganisms can promote the plant growth. Or the other example of agricultural microbiology is the animal infectious diseases. So you can see also this picture. This animal grow in the farm, so it has some possibility that it can be infected by the microorganisms. So this what you have to know, because some of microorganisms or some of diseases is also has the problem on the human health. So you need to know what kind of microorganisms can cause the disease in animal. The other example is, for example, the probiotics. The probiotic is the microorganisms or the bacteria that can produce something that's useful for your health. For example, they put this kind of probiotic in the feed for animal and then try to make some of fatty acid or some vitamin for the animal. And also, any other fields of the agriculture that have the relationship with microorganisms, we call this field as the agricultural microbiology. That's very important for your raw materials, for example, the vegetable or meat. The second area is the industrial microbiology or food microbiology. These two aspects are very important for your field of study because it is a part of food safety management. The student need to know what kind of microorganism can make or can cause the spoilage in the food. But on the other aspect, you need to know there are other microorganisms that can be benefit for the food production. For example, yeast. Yeast can make the alcohol, right? So it can use for making beer or wine. Or lactic acid bacteria can use for make yogurt, right? And even some of the microorganisms can be used for produce some of the product in the industrial scale. For example, to produce the amino acid, to produce the drugs, enzymes, or some vitamins, right? So in this case, you need to distinguish between the spoilage or the bad microorganism that can make the spoilage in food, and also the benefit microorganisms that can make the new product in the food production, right? If you see this picture, you can see that this fungus is the bad microorganism, right? Because it can cause the food spoilage on the bread. But if you see the other picture, this is another types of fungus. This fungus can cause the very special smell or special characteristic of the cheese and make this type of cheese very expensive, right? So this one, the fungus become benefit for food production. So you have to understand this knowledge and then use this knowledge to apply for your work in the future. Okay, now let's start from the basic knowledge. What are living organisms? How do we define them? Here I list some of the characteristics of living organisms. The first one, all living organisms are made of cells. It can be one cell or a single cell, or we can call it unicellular organisms. However, it can be more cells, or we can call it multicellular organisms. Second, all the living organisms require energy and they have their own metabolisms. Third, living organisms can respond to the stimulant, for example, temperature, light, or gravity. And finally, the living organisms can grow and reproduce the offspring by itself, which can be sexual or asexual reproduction. So when we're talking about cell, the cell can be divided into two types. The first one is prokaryotic cells and the second one is eukaryotic cells. So I will try to recall your knowledge a little bit about this. The first one is the prokaryotic cells or prokaryote. The prokaryote do not have a true nucleus. So you can see that the DNA or the genetic material is floated in the cytoplasm and there is no any nuclear membrane. And you can see that the prokaryote doesn't have any membrane-bound organelle. And they have only some of the ribosome and the fat granule as the food storage floating inside the cytoplasm. Some of the prokaryotes have the extra chromosomal DNA, or we can call it plasmid, inside the cytoplasm. On the reaction, for example, replication, transcription, or translation will occur in the cytoplasm too. Some of the prokaryotes have the capsule, you can see that, or the salam layer, and different prokaryotic cells could have different structure of cell wall and cell membrane. Second is eukaryotic cells. The eukaryote have the nucleus surrounded by the nuclear membrane. Therefore, its genetic materials or the DNA is inside the nucleus. And you can see that the eukaryote has the organelle inside the cytoplasm, and each organelle has its own function. Anyway, I will not tell you the function of this, but you can read more detail in the basic cell biology book.